So, for those of you who've been following the lumber futures price, we had a pretty dramatic move taking place today. It went from 640 per thousand down to like 604 per thousand, and it happened within a very short time period. Within, like I say, maybe an hour or so. Now, although a dramatic move is probably not that uncommon for most people out there who are following the stock market or maybe following particular industries, but when it comes to lumber, a 5% move is dramatic. That's huge. Like, typically lumber is really boring and it doesn't go anywhere. It just sits there for the most part, kind of fluctuates occasionally. And then you start seeing price moves going on a particular trend, like, the builders are getting excited, or, there's a slowdown taking place within lumber mill production, like there's curtailments, and then you would see the prices kind of slowly moving from there. Not generally do you see a dramatic 5% move within an hour like we have just recently experienced. Now, I want to go look for some news articles that might have come out that would suggest a panic sell-off or something of that nature when it comes to the lumber industry, but I'm not necessarily finding that taking place right now. There is this idea that the Federal Reserve and their favorite indicators of recession, or of like inverted yield curve predicting a recession, there's a lot of talk that's taking place right now on that particular subject, but I don't know if that would necessarily cause the lumber prices to move as dramatically as they have today. Really, what I think this is very much speculative nonsense that is taking place based on the idea of future tariffs that are going to be coming to the lumber industry. That's really what I think is going on. Now, let me put this back, a little sun shield for my phone there. All right. So when I think about like the issues that we are now facing within the lumber industry that are real. Now, for those of you who know, I work at a lumber yard. I do retail sales for a living. I have been following lumber in such a fine-tooth manner of just every single corner of the lumber market to try and pay attention to that there's really no place that I cannot see the lumber industry right now. And so what I am getting a very general view of is that there is a limited amount of inventory out there. This is something that we have talked about quite a bit. And on top of it, the cedar imports that are coming into the United States, that has been moving dramatically. Like if you were to follow Western red cedar prices specifically, and I don't know if there's any chart that you could go to on the internet to find that, you'd most likely have to just be well informed with your lumber yard or within a distribution network in order to find what the Western red cedar prices would be on a daily basis. But as I am an individual who is in the industry, who is constantly checking prices, we are finding that the Western red cedar, almost every single time we call up to get new, accurate, updated pricing, it is moving up and moving up dramatically. So if you are in the market for Western red cedar, or if you are planning on siding your house, building a fence, building a deck, that particular product, I would not hesitate on. I would pick it up as soon as possible because the prices are moving dramatically on it. However, the Doug fir, the standard and better, the stuff that you would use to frame up a house, like to put the skeleton of a house together, that stuff, although is limited out there, I am not seeing dramatic price moves going up on the retail space of it. In fact, in some areas, I am actually seeing some price decreasing happening on the more common like 2x4 studs or 2x6 studs or something of that nature. That's not going to last long. That's not going to last long at all. We are moving into the building season, right? Wintertime is generally a slowdown. Summertime is going to be a more pronounced time for lumber sales to take place. So you're going to see a lot more volume happening during that time. And in my opinion, right now, considering that we've had a dramatic slowdown in production and the credible threats coming from the tariffs from the Canadian lumber portion of things, I could only assume that at some point in the summer, we are going to find some serious price moves going up. And again, I'm looking at builder sentiment and looking at buyer traffic specifically, because the buyer traffic is not there. If the buyer traffic was there, the builders would be a lot more excited about ramping up their production, and then the demand for lumber would definitely increase, and you would absolutely see some higher prices because of it. But at this point, the volatility is quite extreme. And you can see that by today's price moves within the lumber futures. I mean, again, like a 5% move within an hour, that is unheard of. Like, I've never seen such dramatic moves unless it was, back during the COVID pandemic kind of era where people had no idea what the hell was going on, and there was a lot of panic buying taking place. Well, this would be almost the opposite and be like a panic selling of some sort. Now, I can get the idea that if we have an actual recessionary pressure that is building and going to take place, then yeah, the builders are probably not going to be ramping up production in that kind of environment. But we've had plenty of recession indicators from the past that haven't really come to fruition. Like, we've had the inverted yield curve in the past. We had the SOM rule. We've had all kinds of people out there giving their, analysis on all the reasons why there's going to be a recession, yet we never quite really experienced it in the fashion that I think a lot of people would have expected it. Now, me personally, when I think about the recessionless recession and how it is that that's played out, really, how many times have I brought this up, saying that if we do go into a problem in which that the government would have to step up, what is the two worst problems of a recession? Everybody loses their job, and the corporations get bailed out. Well, what if that doesn't happen this time? What if the recession is allowed to have the unemployment rise? Because a rise in unemployment would typically be the way that the Federal Reserve would try to combat inflation, is by having the unemployment rise. Less people working has less demand going into the economy. With less demand, you will have supply-demand imbalances find equilibrium, and then the inflation comes down. So this is the way that the Federal Reserve typically had looked at fighting inflation. It's not just raising the interest rate to slow down the consumer, it was raising the interest rate to slow down the hiring process that would take place within the economy. Yeah. So now we look at something very similar to this, and not necessarily the rise of unemployment due to corporations not hiring out there, but literally the government creating that situation by having a bunch of employees that are no longer employed, right? So this is very much like almost a forcing of a recessionary type of situation within the economy itself by creating that sort of environment. But again, how many times have we seen these things or heard about these things over the last couple of years that never really played out the way that we had anticipated it? Right now, what I think has taken place is that the Federal Reserve is pushing for an elevated inflation. They don't want to bring inflation down. I don't know how many times I have read an article or listened to people out there who are talking about how the Federal Reserve is attempting to get to a 2% target on their inflation rate, but yet nowhere in the Federal Reserve statements on what it is that they are intending for their goals do they say that they are going for a 2% target. They say they're going for a 2% average inflation rate over time, a 2% long-term inflation expectation, but nowhere do they say that they're actually trying to get inflation to a 2% target. Now, the mainstream media interprets it that way. They hear the Fed say 2% over the long run and think 2% for a continuous amount of time, but that's not what's happening. Right? So to understand what has taken place within the environment of economics when it comes to the Federal Reserve and what it is that they are wanting with inflation, they are looking for an elevated inflation. They want it moderately above 2% for some time. And now with that particular moderately above 2% for some time, you are probably not going to find a whole lot of people who are going to be terribly excited about participating inside of that higher interest rates by buying homes. And without people buying homes, then you're going to have a dramatic slowdown in the building industry, which is probably the number one produced product here in the United States, is building. Okay? So again, I look at things like this and I think to myself, it's not the tariffs, the credible threats of it. It's not any of the interest rates setting or any of that stuff that is happening right now. Because we think about it, the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates and mortgage rates went up. This has everything to do with people's interpretation of what it is that's happening, their expectations of the future. When we find that people are looking towards the future thinking, man, I am going to be able to refinance this into a better interest rate going into the future, they would ramp up production. It would just take place. But with the uncertainty and people just simply not knowing of what it is that's happening, they are going to back off on their purchases. I mean, think about just even the idea, the credible threat of the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates sometime in June. Like I read this one the other day, or this morning, right? The Federal Reserve is going to lower interest rates in June. So tell me, are you really that excited about the moment right now that has taken place? Probably not. You might be somewhat hopeful about the summer, but as of right now, it's very concerning about whether or not we are actually going to have lower interest rates going into the future. There's a lot of talk about raising interest rates from here. So again, with all this uncertainty that is playing out within the economy, it makes it very difficult for people to say, yeah, I'm going to be very confident in making this purchase right now, and I'm going to be very confident going into the future, considering that the Federal Reserve has no idea of what it is that they are going to be doing. Like, this is the way that most people feel about it. Right? How is that going to create a very confident or strong economy? It can't. The consumer, scared. Doesn't even, like, the consumer is fading away quickly. And again, how much uncertainty do they have to put out there into the mainstream media, into the propagandized information, in order for people to feel the way they need to create the environment that the Federal Reserve is looking for? Right? And this is what we're experiencing right now. Think about it. Like, how many people are anticipating an inflationary pressure building? Not from the Fed money printing, but just from everything else that is happening out there. That elevated inflation expectation is a self-fulfilling prophecy. The Federal Reserve, who is trying to get to neutral, like they want their Fed funds rate at neutral, neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. And if they are sitting at a position in which that they do not move, right? They're just sitting here, not going anywhere, and yet they're trying to get to neutral, and we have elevated inflation expectations out there, which begins to raise the interest rates, including the neutral interest rate. Once that moves into a higher position, the Federal Reserve may find themselves at neutral and not doing anything at all. And this is very, very concerning when it comes to the idea of the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates going into the future. They may not. They very well could keep pushing, not the Fed, but just the propagandized information, keep pushing the idea of higher inflation due to the uncertainty that has taken place out there, and it puts the neutral position, the neutral interest rate, right where the Fed is standing. I don't know how many people have internalized that to look at it this way. See, this is one of the reasons why I even follow lumber. I follow lumber as closely as I do because this is a major indicator of what's going to be taking place within the new construction market. And when I hear people saying, oh man, lumber is going to go all skyrocketing, it's going to be so expensive because of all the Canadian tariffs that are going to hit, it's going to cause the cost of building to just absolutely explode. And I'm like, can you explain why that would happen? I mean, we just had a 14% tariff put on lumber just back in August, right? Is anybody concerned about that creating high prices today? But all of a sudden we got the prospect of a possible tariff coming into the future, and it actually creates higher prices, even though it hasn't happened yet. Only to find out that these higher prices are really not that sustainable. Nobody's really buying lumber at that price, and the only way you're actually going to move it is to lower the price down. All right? See, what people misunderstand about most of the tariffs that are inflicted upon these other nations is to keep prices from being too low. Right? It's to keep prices from falling any further, screwing our domestic manufacturers. That's what tariffs are all about. It doesn't create higher prices. I mean, it can create higher prices, but that's not the intended purpose of them. The intended purpose of it is to create a situation in which if the prices don't fall any further, making it harder on our domestic manufacturers. All right, let's read some comments here. All right, can I grow more CO2 neutral? Okay. Credible threat tariffs. Absolutely. They are totally. I mean, how many people are already jacking up the prices of items based on the idea of these? Like, even the lumber prices moved up dramatically over the last, what was it, month or so. And I know that people are looking at it, like speculating on the idea, loading up on lumber to get ready before these tariffs kick in. And the moment that they do kick in, they're going to realize, man, there's not that much demand out there for it. And you're going to find that the prices are not going to be exploding like a lot of people are going to anticipate. And then even if they did, it's going to be because buyer traffic has picked up and the builders are now ramping up production. When you see that ramping up of production, you're going to find the demand for lumber increasing, and then you're going to find that the prices are going to move up. If this happens after the tariffs, people are going to blame the tariffs straight up because they don't look at it from any other position. The mainstream media has never informed them of any other way that could ever possibly have gone. Yet here I can describe it ahead of time, and even after it takes place, they're still not going to believe me. Right? And that's cool. I mean, everybody else who's following the channel is going to look back and say, yeah, UE did say this, right? But even still then, I'll got people who say, yeah, you were right, but, you were right for the wrong reasons or whatever. I mean, I got that one too. All right, do you think negative interest rates is likely to happen within the next few decades? Yeah, probably. Kyle, I think that's a really good question. I think really you probably wouldn't have to be too concerned about negative interest rates until we find ourselves in a cashless society. Once you find yourself in a cashless society, or there's another way they can do it, is if they put a burden on you by depositing or withdrawing cash, meaning basically charging a fee, you're going to have to see those two things. Digital currencies in play, like central bank digital currency or stable coins or something, far more like to the point that they are regularly being used. And you would have to see a fee on cash for deposits or withdrawals, or just completely abandoning, the removal of cash out of the system altogether. Once that has taken place, then the banking system would have a position in which a negative interest rates could be enforced. But until then, I don't really see, or I'm not terribly concerned about negative interest rates. Okay. Unstable debt path, true. Sustainable debt, never. All right, let me back it up here. Left my corporate job at UPS because they are laying off and cost cutting like crazy. Left to become a plumbing apprentice for my job security. Really think white collar corporate jobs will dissolve. I mean, a lot of them will. I started watching because you drive a beater car. You could be a used car salesman. No shade. Beater cars for life. Absolutely, man. In fact, I am in the market for going and picking up another beater car, and if I do get it, I will do a video on that one too, because a lot of you know that I sold off the Toyota Corolla. I bought a Toyota Corolla for $500. I don't think I replaced anything as far as parts go. The car was sideswiped, so the rear view mirror was taken off. A viewer sent me a new rear view mirror for that car. That was probably the only thing I actually did to the vehicle. I may have put tires on it too. I can't remember. Replaced the battery. So those are the things. Other than oil changes, that was it. That's the only thing I did with that car. Drove it for, I don't even know, 5 years or something like that, and sold it for $500. So I sold it for exactly what I paid for it, and I made sure that I sold it to an individual who was going to very much appreciate it. It was my friend's daughter, who's getting out of, just finishing high school, getting out on her own, has a job, has all the stuff, and needed a cheap, reliable vehicle to drive around, and she absolutely loves it, and she named it Ruby. So I got rid of the Toyota Corolla, even though it was one of the better vehicles I probably had as far as reliability and just ease, cheap transportation. Really couldn't beat it. All right, got this here S10, bought it for $1,200. Been driving it around for 3 years now, over 3 years. Great vehicle, nothing to look at. Door's been hyperextended. It's all kind of beat up or whatever. Great vehicle, love it. Couldn't pass it up for $1 million. Wouldn't pass it up. Well, I give it for $1 million, but wouldn't pass it up. Right? Love this car. Have a '99 Ford Explorer. It was given to me. It cost $900 to get it up and running again. My wife is driving that vehicle today. And what else? That's it. Like, those are the vehicles that I drive. She has a newer vehicle that is actually in the shop right now, trying to figure out what it is that we're going to do with that because the transmission is gone. So her new vehicle is actually what we're still making payments on, is now in the shop and not working. My beater vehicles are what we're driving, and I'm in the market to get another beater vehicle because, you know what, new cars do nothing but cost you money and drive you into the poorhouse. If you want to be rich, you drive a POS beater. I will stick to this for the rest of my life. I don't care what anybody says about, oh, you'll spend more money on maintenance and blah, blah, blah. I heard it a million times, right? I mean, I don't mean to make fun of the voices of it, but that's exactly what these people say to self-justify their expensive purchase that they have made. And that's exactly what it is. It's self-justification. It's an ego trip. It's status, right? I can't be seen driving around in a '99 Toyota Corolla that's all beat up. How embarrassing would that be? And I tell you what, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Like, literally nobody cares. Would they like it if you drove a better car? Probably, but they don't care that you drive a better car. In fact, most of the guys who I know who are business minded, who are pushing for excellence, who are doing all that good things in life, like the things that you say, hey, are elevating you up, they have never once asked me what kind of vehicle I drive. Not one time have they said, hey, what kind of car do you? They do not care, right? Because that's not important. And for me, that is the better understanding that I could go out there and be blasting $800 a month driving a new vehicle around. But no, not me. Right? I would much rather have that money to pay off debt, to invest back into Bitcoin or stocks or something of that nature. And when it comes to this next vehicle that I'm going to get, it's probably going to be one of the most expensive vehicles that I have ever bought. And I am like almost kind of looking forward to it. And I can't wait to show you. And it is a beast. Oh, yeah. I hope I get it. But I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to tell you too much more about it. All right, what car insurance costs these days on a new car? Hell, I wouldn't know. I don't I guess I know because I pay for my wife's insurance. But liability insurance on this old S10 isn't much, right? Neither is the Explorer. Like, the liability insurance on those things is almost nothing, you know? All right, thoughts on leasing. I had a beater, but was breaking down and a lot cost money. I mean, what am I going to say, man? I'm going to tell you that the leasing is going to be expensive, right? And then you end up with nothing at the end of it. All you ended up with was the ability to make a payment and drive. Like, I mean, I would much rather buy a $1,200 vehicle once a year than to spend $1,200 a month on a vehicle, or even half that. All right? Like, I mean, to me, I don't find it inconvenient. Like, I'm like, if this vehicle broke down, I have another vehicle I jump into, right? I'm anticipating, like, when you drive a POS beater, you got to have a backup. Like, definitely have to have a backup. It could be that I can't start this car as soon as I'm done making the video. If that's to take place, then I have to have a game plan for that to deal with it. If I was absolutely, like, depending on this thing starting every single morning, right, then I got to have a backup, which I do, right? Because that's how you got to operate when you have a POS beater. You know, you can't just rely on it, you know, and even even my wife's car. I mean, it's a newer vehicle that, you know, we're actually still making payments on. And, right, that's the thing that's not reliable at all. In fact, she's now relying on the beaters, you know. Just rebuilt my tranny and my Scion. Might drive it to the RCL again. Right on. All right. I have not seen a used beater anywhere for that cheap in the 90s. Yes, all day long. I, all right. I don't know what to tell you guys. I come across these vehicles all the time. All the time. Like, I mean, not every single day, not when I want to, but they pop up all the time, right? Here's the thing, you got to be ready to jump, right? It was just like, or have a place to put it. This is the thing. Most people are just like, hey, so and so selling a $650 car. They don't even consider it. Like, yeah, whatever, right? Not me. I'm like, $650 car is a run. Yeah, stop. Got tires on it. Registration. I want to look at it. Right? That's my attitude. Right? $650. Like, I don't even care what kind of car it is. It was like, does it run? Does it got tires? Any better? What? Yeah. All right, man. Sounding good. It's like Toyota even. Oh, cool. Right? This is my attitude towards it. Like, I don't care what kind of vehicle it is. If it's that cheap and it run, hell yeah, I'm on it. All right. Leasing is actually good, better than buying if you use money right. Versus new car, you have to invest the difference, time, value of money. Yeah, and again, like if you want, for those people out there who really enjoy driving, like they really enjoy the experience of having the new car and then driving on the road, and they go on these half-hour trips every single day, that they really want to experience something really awesome with, right? Or even longer. Like, I mean, that's a half-hour trip for me, right? Like me, I don't need a fancy luxurious experience to get to work. I just don't. Like, in fact, I think opposite of that. I'm thinking the only thing I really need is for it to have a radio so I can listen to something on the way in. That's it. So, but there's other people out there who really enjoy it. Like that's what they find happiness in, is driving a nice vehicle, right? And so I'm not that way, so I don't get that experience from it. Like I can enjoy driving for like say a few days or something like that in a new vehicle, but then after that it wears off and I don't care anymore about it. So to me, like that's not an experience that I care to have, you know. My family treats used vehicles like Bic lighters, and anything over $1,000 repair bill will get what you can for parts, vehicles, and get another. Currently, I have a 2003 Ford Escape for $2,800. I really miss my manual training. Yeah, I like the manual transmissions myself. Alrighty guys, this was a lot of fun, but I have got to call it quits. I wanted to talk just mainly about lumber, but you know, talking about used vehicles I think is probably going to be a much better discussion, because really we're trying to figure out what it is that we can do to make the best possible outcome for ourselves. And to me, like there has never been a bigger waste of money than a vehicle, especially a new vehicle. And again, like all the self-justification that people put out there about reliability and safety and all this other stuff, again, that's all made up in your own head. The reality of the situation is you buy a $1,200 vehicle and you drive that thing for 3 years. Do you have any idea on how much money that saves? Like, it's unreal, the amount. People say all the time, it was like, oh man, nobody can afford to buy a house. And I'm thinking, well, I can buy a house, but I can't afford a new vehicle. So, you know, I mean, which one are you gonna weigh out? Do you want to drive and look cool and have a nice, reliable vehicle? Or do you want to live in a house and become a property owner? Separate yourself from the poor who are driving the nice vehicle. You see the difference inside of this? Like I would much rather live in a house, buying that property that has the potential to be a rental income later on in my future, than to be driving around in a new Camaro. That's just me personally. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking at it wrong. All right. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.